Welcome to the Fifth Minute, the space between who you were and who you are becoming. Today, we are talking about the ghosts we carry, not the ghosts that haunt abandoned places, not shadows that disappear when the lights come on. The ghosts I want to talk about are the ones we carry with us, the ones that follow us into new rooms, new relationships, new opportunities. The ones that whisper to us when everything gets quiet, the ghosts of who we used to be, the versions of ourselves we have outgrown, but never said goodbye to, because sometimes, the hardest thing to leave behind is not a place, it is not a person, it is not even a memory. Sometimes, the hardest thing to leave behind is an identity. A version of yourself you have carried for so long that you forgot you were allowed to put it down, because somewhere along the way, something happened. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe it was a loss, maybe it was a moment where you didn't recognize yourself. Maybe it was a season of your life where you were simply trying to survive, and somehow, one moment became a message, one failure became a label. One painful chapter became a name you started answering to. I am the person who always fails. I am the person who ruins things. I am the person who cannot change. I am the person who is broken. I am the person who always makes the wrong choice. And after hearing those words enough times, something strange happens. You stop saying, I made a mistake, and you start saying, I am a mistake. You stop saying, I went through something painful, and you start saying, pain is who I am. You stop saying, I struggled, and you start saying, I am someone who struggles, but listen carefully. There is a difference between what happened to you and who you are. There is a difference between a chapter and the entire book. A chapter can be painful without being the whole story. A chapter can be dark without meaning the story is over. A chapter can explain where you have been without deciding where you are going. But we forget that. We look back at the hardest moments of our lives and we give them too much power. We let one conversation define us. One mistake define us. One person's opinion define us. One version of ourselves become the only version we believe exists. And the truth is, you have changed more times than you realize. Think about it. Think about the person you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 1 year ago. Think about the things that once felt permanent, the problems you thought you would never escape, the fears you thought would always control you, the things you were certain you could never live without. And yet, here you are. You survived a version of yourself that once believed it would never leave. The person you thought you would always be became someone you remember. The things that once felt impossible became things you learned from. The moments that once felt like endings became places you passed through. But there is something we rarely talk about, sometimes, even after we leave a version of ourselves behind. We keep carrying them, we keep defending them, we keep punishing them, we keep allowing them to make decisions for us. And that is exhausting, because the heaviest thing a person can carry is not their past. It is the belief that their past is the only version of themselves they are allowed to be. Think about that. How much energy does it take to constantly prove you are still the person you were? How much effort does it take to protect an identity you no longer believe in? How much of your life is spent arguing with a ghost that tells you, you always do this, you will never change, this is just who you are. But that voice, that identity, that version of yourself was created in a moment. It was created with limited information, limited experience, limited understanding. It was created by a person who was doing the best they could with what they knew at the time. And maybe that person made mistakes. Maybe they hurt people. Maybe they made choices they wish they could change. Maybe they became someone they don't recognize, but they were still learning. They were still growing. They were still becoming the person you were. Was never your enemy, they were simply unfinished, and maybe that is why you are tired, not because you are weak, not because you are incapable, but because you have been carrying a person who no longer lives here. You have been trying to move forward, while still holding onto a version of yourself that belongs behind you. You have been asking the past for permission to become something new, but the past cannot give you permission, because the past is not where you are going. It is only where you have been, and today, I want you to remember something important. You are allowed to outgrow yourself. You are allowed to become someone different. You are allowed to look back at who you were with understanding instead of judgment, because becoming better does not mean hatting who you used to be. It means honoring the person who carried you this far and finally allowing them to rest, because they did their job, they got you here. And now, it is your turn to carry yourself forward, meeting the person you were. There is something I want you to do, something that may feel uncomfortable at first, but stay with me, because this is not about going backward. This is about finally making peace with the person who brought you here. I want you to imagine the person you used to be, not the person you wish you had been, not the person you wish you could erase, not the person you are afraid people still see. I want you to imagine the real person, the person who lived those moments, the person who made those choices, the person who carried those struggles, the person who was simply trying to find a way forward. Imagine them standing in front of you, right now. Look at them, really look at them. Notice something. They are not looking at you with anger. They are not keeping a list of your mistakes. They are not counting every time you failed. They are not asking why you were not stronger, why you were not smarter, why you did not know what you know now, because they understand something you may have forgotten. They were you and you were them. The only difference is time. The only difference is experience. The only difference is that you have lived through things they had not experienced yet. So many times, we look back at who we were, with the knowledge we have today, and we judge them for not having it. We look at old decisions, with a perspective they never had. We look at old mistakes, with a wisdom they had not earned yet. We ask, why did you do that? Why didn't you know better? Why didn't you see what was coming? But maybe those are not the questions we should be asking. Maybe the question is different. Maybe the question is, what were you trying to survive? Because the person you were was not waking up every day trying to ruin your future. They were trying to make it through their present. They were trying to handle pain they did not understand. They were trying to navigate situations they had never faced before. They were trying to protect themselves with the tools they had available. And sometimes, those tools were not enough. Sometimes they made mistakes. Sometimes they reacted from fear. Sometimes they chose the wrong path. Sometimes they hurt themselves. Sometimes they hurt others. But they were still learning. They were still becoming. They were still a person trying to find their way home. The person you were did not have today's knowledge. They did not know what you know now. They did not have today's perspective. They could not see the lessons that would come later. They did not have today's strength, because strength is not something you are born with. Strength is something life teaches you. And they were making choices with the tools they had, not the tools you have today. That matters, because we are often cruel to our past selves. For not having survived things they had never encountered before, we expect our younger selves to know the ending. While they were still living the beginning, we expect them to understand the lesson. While they were still experiencing the pain, we expect them to be the person we are becoming, before they had the chance to become them. But they were never supposed to be you. Not yet. They had a purpose. They had a role to play. They were supposed to learn. They were supposed to grow. They were supposed to make mistakes. They were supposed to become the person who eventually became you. They were not your enemy. They were the person who carried you here. Think about that. Every difficult day they survived, they carried you closer to this moment. Every time they got back up, they carried you closer to this moment. Every time they chose to keep going, even when they did not understand why. They carried you closer to this moment. They carried dreams you had forgotten. They carried hope you thought was gone. They carried the small pieces of yourself you thought you lost. And now, after everything, they are standing in front of you, and they have one question. A question they have been waiting years to ask. Not, did we become perfect? Not, did we avoid every mistake? Not, did everything happen the way we wanted? No, the question is much simpler, much more important. They look at you, and they ask, did we make it? Pause, and now, I want you to answer them. Not with perfection, not with a story about how everything worked out exactly the way you planned, just with the truth. Yes, we did. We made it through nights we thought would never end. We survived moments we thought would break us. We walked through doors we were certain we could never open. We faced things we never thought we would have to face. We lost things we thought we could never live without. We said goodbye to versions of ourselves we thought would last forever, and somehow, somewhere, we kept going. We are still here, not because everything became easy, not because every wound disappeared, not because every question was answered, but because we kept moving, we kept choosing, we kept becoming, and maybe that is what your younger self needed to know all along. They were not waiting for you to become flawless. They were not waiting for you to prove you never made mistakes. They were not waiting for you to become someone who never struggled. They were waiting to know one thing, that you did not abandon them, because your younger self does not need you to punish yourself forever. They do not need you to replay every mistake until it becomes a prison. They do not need you to spend the rest of your life trying to earn forgiveness. They need you to remember them. They need you to understand them. They need you to look back and say, I understand why you did what you did. I understand why you were afraid. I understand why you made those choices. You were trying to survive, and maybe, for the first time, you can stop fighting the person you used to be, because they were never the person holding you back. They were the person who carried you forward. They carried you here, and now, it is your turn to carry yourself forward, becoming the person ahead. There is something important you need to understand. Change rarely happens the way we imagine it will. We imagine there will be one moment, one decision, one day where everything suddenly changes, where we wake up, and we are finally the person we wanted to become. But that is not how transformation works. You do not become someone new in one dramatic moment. You become someone new through thousands of small decisions, quiet decisions, invisible decisions. The choices nobody else sees, the promises nobody else knows you made, the moments where you choose who you want to become, instead of simply repeating who you have been, because becoming is not something that happens all at once. It is something you practice. Every single day, every choice you make is a vote for the person you are becoming, not a vote for the person you were, not a vote for your mistakes. Not a vote for the labels you were given, a vote for the direction you are choosing to walk. Think about that. Every morning you wake up, you are given another opportunity, another moment, another fifth minute, another chance to decide what happens next, and every decision sends a message, not to the world, but to yourself. This is who I am becoming. When you keep a promise nobody else knows about, you build trust with yourself. You teach yourself, I can count on me. When you do the difficult thing even when nobody is watching, you teach yourself, I am someone who shows up. When you choose patience instead of anger, you become someone you respect. When you choose honesty instead of hiding, you become someone you trust. When you choose courage instead of fear, you become someone who believes they are capable. And when you try again after failing, when you stand back up after falling, when you decide that one bad moment does not get to decide the rest of your story, you prove something important. Your story is still being written, because the person you are becoming is not created by your biggest moments alone. They are created by the small moments, the ordinary moments, the moments that seem too small to matter, but they do matter. They always have. A single promise kept may seem insignificant, but it is evidence. A single healthy choice may seem insignificant, but it is evidence. A single moment where you choose differently than you would have before is evidence. Evidence that you are changing, evidence that you are growing, evidence that the person ahead of you is becoming real. This is why the fifth minute matters. Because the future is not built somewhere far away. It is built here, in the small space between what happens and what you choose to do next. That is where your life changes, not in perfection, not in having everything figured out, not in becoming someone who never struggles, but in the moment where you decide, I am still becoming. The person ahead of you does not need you to be perfect. They do not need you to never make mistakes. They do not need you to erase every painful part of your story, because perfection was never the goal. Growth was. The person you are becoming is not someone who has never fallen. They are someone who learned how to stand back up. They are not someone who has never been hurt. They are someone who learned they can heal. They are not someone who never feels afraid. They are someone who chooses courage anyway, and maybe that is the most important thing you can remember. Your future self is not waiting for you to become someone else. They are waiting for you to keep becoming yourself. The person you are becoming is not a stranger. They are already a part of you. They are built from every promise you keep, every lesson you learn, every choice you make, every moment where you decide, I will not abandon myself. So remember this, your past is part of your story, but it is not the author of your future. Your past can teach you. It can give you wisdom. It can show you what matters. It can remind you how far you have traveled, but it does not get to write every chapter that comes after this one, because the pen is still in your hand. The next choice is still yours. The next promise is still yours. The next step is still yours. You are not your history, you are your direction, and the direction you choose today becomes the path you walk tomorrow. So choose carefully, choose kindly, choose intentionally, not because you have to become someone worthy, but because you already are someone worth showing up for. The person you are becoming is waiting for you, not a perfect person, not a flawless person, not someone who never struggles, a person who keeps promises, a person who shows up, a person who chooses again. One decision, one moment, one promise at a time, because here we do not negotiate, we keep promises, and I'll meet you on the fifth minute.